I'm Austin Bailey. And I'm Austin Berryman. And we're going to the Pine Mountain Buddhist Temple.
You ever look at pictures and see, those kind of, usually they're round, but not necessarily, and then they have a spire like this thing. Those are almost all stupas. Every temple basically in Southeast Asia will have one of some size or description. The original ones, 2,500 years ago, contained pieces of bone or a tooth or ashes or something from the Buddha. Because the Buddha, when he died, was cremated, and then they scooped all that up and they preserve it. And one of the interesting things about the old Buddhist saints or great teachers like the Buddha is they have what are called relics, which are these little pearl-like things that develop, and they seem to sort of produce spontaneously out of these collections of ash or whatever that have been saved from the funeral pyre of a great monk or teacher. And so then they take those and shrine them in a stupa.
I have a question. What is your guys' view of the Buddha as a teacher, and then his views are his teachings and writings?
Well, they're what we base our lives and our practice on. Yeah. Which ideally, would be the same thing in Christianity, right? You base your how you live and your ethical code and all of that on teachings of Jesus. So that's how it is for Buddhists. The Buddha left behind very extensive teachings because he had a 45-year career of teaching, and people at the time, if you understand something about Indian culture, Indian culture is traditionally been very oriented around religion. And there is a long history of memorization. People would memorize all of these scriptures, all these sermons of the Buddha, and so that was done originally for the first several hundred years after his life. And then, as writing developed, they committed it all to writing. Okay. This is our Founder's Hall, or shrine, excuse me. In Far East Asian culture, they have what we would consider ancestor worship. They venerate their ancestors. And even in Japan in particular, at least in the old days, they would have a whole family altar. And they would have these little kind of tombstones with the names of their ancestors, great-great-grandparents, etc., written on them. So this is a motif which is kind of Japanese in origin. But what it does is it is a lineage back to the Buddha of teachers and disciples. Okay, so I don't know if it's 100% historically accurate, but it's probably very close. And so Jiyu was my teacher, and her teacher was Chisan, Kato Chisan. And you go back, these are all Japanese names, and then at some point going back in time, you go through China, about 22 or 24 names from China, and then you go even further back and you get back into India. And then all the way back, Shakyamuni is the historical Buddha who founded Buddhism. Shakya was his clan, actually, like a family, okay, like the Bailey family or something.
Yeah.
And Muni is sage, so he was sage of the Shakya clan. That's what that name means. His name when he was alive was Siddhartha. Have you heard of that book and movie and stuff? Siddhartha.
Yeah.
Siddhartha Gautama. That was his actual name. And then these shrines, as I mentioned, they're devoted to some aspect of Buddhist teaching. So this is Jizo, like the statue you were looking at in my house. Optimism and courage. He's the only one actually that appears as a monk. This is a monk's staff that he has, which in like in China, if you were walking back in the wilds, a monk would have a staff with those rings that make noise so that the tigers and I don't know what all that live back in there would be aware of your presence and be forewarned. And then this is a Chalanata or Fudomyo in Japan. This is very Japanese here. And he's a guardian. And he represents determination and resolve. Kind of very masculine qualities, fierceness, determination. I'm gonna stick this out. I'm gonna, the sword is for cutting through delusions. The rope is for binding them up. He's got, kind of a fierce look on his face, typically. Flames of hellfire behind him. As all these Buddhist concepts kind of go from one culture to the next, they develop their own what's the word? Language specific nomenclature to that. So this image would have started out as Avalokiteshvara in India. Then you go to China where it's Kuan Yin, and then you go to Japan where it's Kanzeon, or to Korea where it's Kwan so it kind of gets changed depending on the culture. So this is where we do our our sitting meditation. Every morning we have service. And in the evening we have chanting also. So it gets used every day, morning and evening.
So although it's a Zen Buddhist temple, they have Tibetan prayer flags, and I asked the monk why that is, and he said he pretty much described the U.S. as a melting pot for Buddhism, and specifically this place. So he said they kind of incorporate all aspects of the different sects of Buddhism here. So. There's the stupa, and they said they actually built it based on a mandala. So each corner points in direction. Like the one that points off that way is north, and opposite that south.
So this is a statue at the entrance of the temple, and an interesting story. Reverend Sekai was telling us how they acquired it, and when they got all the blocks to make the stupa from Indonesia, and because shipping prices went up, they included this statue because they felt bad. And another interesting thing is the hand symbol that you see him doing, which looks like that. It's a symbol in Buddhism in Asia that represents like, listen, I'm teaching. So it's like, listen to this.